Morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. Chapter 42, verse 21. The brothers find themselves with the viceroy of Egypt, who unbeknownst to them is their own brother Yosef, and he drives them mishuga. He accuses them of being of fabricating a story. He seizes one of them. He seizes Shimon. He says, yeah, you keep on talking about there's this younger brother at home, referring to Binyamin. Tell you what, if you come with Binyamin, I'll let Shimon go. And this whole thing is so bizarre from A to Z. Verse 21, Vayomru Ishalochiv, each one said to his brother, Avol Ashimim Anachnu Alachinu. It must be that we're guilty regarding our brother Yosef. We saw the pain of his soul when he beseeched us, and he didn't listen. And therefore, we have had this calamity befall us. It's a very poignant pasuk, but actually it's a difficult pasuk. I would ask you to guess that the brothers got to a point of recognizing they had done something wrong. And I would ask you, so fill in the blank. What do you think they recognized they did wrong? I don't know. How about selling their brother? That's not what they say. They say that we saw his pain and we didn't listen. That's what they say. Does that include selling the brother? Does that not include selling the brother? The other thing, which is, I don't think he asked Prezi a question, but it's certainly a fair question as well. When the Torah records this story, the Torah doesn't make a point of talking about that. The Torah doesn't say, and there Yosef was crying out to them from the pit. The Torah doesn't say that. So it doesn't seem so important in the Torah's eyes, and they seem to think this is the seminal moment. So what's going on? Ramban and Pasuk Chaf Aleph. Asher ra'inu tzaras nafsho b'schanano eleinu. Chashvu lahem ha'achzarios la'onesh gadol yosem min ha'mechira. Says the Ramban that they assessed that their lack of compassion for their brother was a more grave matter than the fact that they sold him in the first place. Ki haya achiyam b'saram mischanein u'misnapel lifneim. Their brother is begging them, their own flesh and blood is begging them to save him. V'lo yirachamu, and they don't have mercy on him. That's a very grave thing. Va'kasuv lo siper zesham. It's interesting, the pasuk doesn't mention it happening. Om b'nei shadavar yadua b'teva ki yischanen adam le'echav v'vo liyadam laharalo v'yashbiyim b'chayaviyim v'yasa kol asher yuchal lahatzil nafsho mimaves. So the first answer the Ramban gives as to why the Torah wouldn't mention it is because it's obvious. It's obvious that's whatever. What do you think? You think Yosef was sitting with his legs folded in the pit reading the newspaper? Of course. He was begging them to save him, and swearing by his father's life. That's one possibility. Or maybe the Torah doesn't want. The Torah is telling us the important aspects of the story to go on and on about how the brothers coldly and callously ignored the cries of Yosef. It's not complimentary to them. So maybe Hashem doesn't want to put that in the Torah. The Ramban finally says this happens all the time in the Chumash. That there's two spots in the Chumash that describe an event or halacha or whatever it is, and in one place it goes to greater length in one area, and another place it's more brief in that area. In general, Chumash is understood to be read as one big unit. So these are three different possibilities. But the Ramban says the bottom line is they're really not expressing regret for the sale. They're not addressing that, but they think that the cruelty of not being moved by his cries was even worse than the act of selling it. Now, does that mean, I was talking to someone last Shabbos who cited this pasuk and said, so you see that at this juncture, they still think they did the right thing. In other words, the reason they're not mentioning the fact that they sold them is because they don't feel bad that they sold them. That was right to some, but they feel bad that they didn't bother them more. That certainly fits with the Ramban. I'm not sure if the Ramban says that, would say it, but he could say it. Sforno on Pasuk Chaf Aleph. B'schanano eleinu v'lo shamanu. V'hayinu achzarim neged achinu. We were cruel to our brother. Af al pi shechashavnu l'rodef. Even though we assessed that he was trying to do us in, I think we discussed this last week to a certain extent. When he begged us to save him, we should have had compassion. First of all, the Sforno says it's measure for measure. We are being exposed to the cruelty of this viceroy of Egypt. God is creating events that we're being exposed to the cruelty of the viceroy of Egypt because we were cruel. Now, you might read the Sforno differently. I think what the Sforno is saying is that they're actually expressing regret for selling him in the first place, maybe not for having the rationale to sell him, but for not changing their tune once their brother was begging them. So as the Ramban seems to say, the issue is solely that they didn't have Rahmanas on him, like it didn't bother them. The Sforno seems to be saying that if nothing else, his pleas should have changed their approach and they should have pulled him up out of the pit. He's not explicit about it, but I think that's what the Sforno is saying. But what is interesting is the Sforno is explaining a little more what their logical flow is that they think it's measure for measure, that they were cruel and therefore they're being exposed to cruelty here. Definitely an interesting thing to think about. Let's jump ahead. Chapter 43, verse 14. Chapter 43, 43, verse 14. The brothers come back. Shimon is taken by the viceroy of Egypt. He's back in Egypt. He's still in Egypt. The brothers are there with Yaakov, back in Israel with Yaakov. Yaakov says, we need more food. They say to him, the viceroy of Egypt told us not to come back unless we bring Binyamin with him. But I guess we bring Binyamin along. So what do you want us to do? Do you want us to, it's one or the other. Either we don't go, we don't get food, or we take Binyamin. Yaakov is clearly very, very reluctant to let them take Binyamin. He only had 2 children. Obviously, every child is precious, but he only had 2 children with Rachel, and one of them is gone. Yosef is long gone, left for dead. Binyamin's the only one he has left. He's very reluctant to let them go, but he ultimately decides to let them go with Binyamin. And he says in verse 14, V'kel shakai yitain lachem rachamim l'fnei ha'ish. God should give you mercy before this man. God should make it that this viceroy of Egypt should look at you with compassion. V'shilach lachem sachichem acher ve'es Binyamin. And he should send to you your other brother and Binyamin. V'ani kasher shacholti. And as for me, the same way that I've lost, the way Rashi explains it, the same way that I've lost other child, I might lose Binyamin as well. Who is Achichem Acher? Let him send you your other brother and Binyamin. Who's he referencing? The basic shot of the pasuk would seem to be Shimon. Let him send you back Shimon. But what a strange, this is a very poignant pasuk. Why doesn't he refer to Shimon by name? This is strange. He refers to Binyamin by name. Ramban on pasuk Yudaled. V'shilach lachem asachichem acher ves Binyamin. Nira al derech hapshat. It would appear that the straightforward meaning here is ki lo haya Shimon ritzui aviv bavur dvar Shechem. This is really an eye-opening shot. Ramban says Yaakov still had a lot of resentment towards Shimon for what he did with Shechem. Remember, Levi and Shimon were the ones who killed all the men of the city of Shechem, and Yaakov was very upset about it afterwards. Ulakach lo amar es Shimon b'ni ves Binyamin ki lo yizkarenu b'shmo. Because of his resentment of Shimon's actions, he doesn't refer to Shimon directly by name. V'kasher ozvu b'mitzrayim yamim rabim ilu haya b'beiso lechem lo shalach adayin es Binyamin v'yanchem b'mitzrayim. another thing to think about. The Ramban says, Shimon, he doesn't know. Now, it happens to be that we're told that Yosef treated Shimon very well once they were all gone, because it's his brother. But they don't know what's going on with their brother. Says the Ramban, if not for the fact that the family needed bread, it would have been fine with Yaakov if Shimon was stuck in jail. I mean, it'd be unfortunate, but chaval. The Ramban says that fits with this idea of not even referring to Shimon by name. Why would he feel differently about Shimon? The Ramban says, read the Chumash. He's very disappointed and he's very angry about what Shimon did with Shechem. That's somewhat of a surprising shot, of course. V'Rashi kosav ruach hakodesh nitznitzabo l'rabos es Yosef. There's a famous Rashi over here. Rashi says that God put words in his mouth, that he specifically spoke in a vague, broad term. He would have normally referred to his son as Shimon, but this terminology, your other brother, could also include Yosef. Yosef, Acher ze Shimon. I shouldn't have said God put words in his mouth. He was inspired to say it that way. So that according to the Medrash, Achichem, Acher is referencing two different people. Achichem is Yosef, Acher, the other one is Shimon. And Binyamin is the next words. V'nachonu, ki nasan dato be'esat filu lispal stam gam al ha'acher la yodenu chai. Such a powerful shot. So again, I misspoke a moment ago when I said that God just put these words in his mouth. The Ramban says, according to this shot with Rashi, he's actively davening. Maybe Yosef will come back. Very powerful. It's been over 20 years. Yosef was left for dead. But at this moment, he could still daven that Yosef should come back. And that says, the Rashi with Ramban's explanation, that's why he speaks in this vague way here. Veloshon Acher. Okay, let's hold on that. Let's just see if we have time for one more thing. Okay, if we jump ahead now to verse 16, the brothers come. They come with Binyamin, and all of a sudden, Yosef says, "Yeah, I want to have a special meal with these Jewish men." Again, it's so confusing. You just watch the story. We're just seeing snippets. One day he seems to be very harsh with them. One day he seems to be very warm with them. It's like all over the place. There's a whole thing. He gives Binyamin special gifts. He gives all of them gifts, but he gives Binyamin special gifts. What's his game here? What's he getting at? If you look at the Sforno Pasuk design, I'm sure many of you would have guessed this, but it's always interesting to see it in writing. Sforno on Pasuk Tesayin, the last Sforno on the Pasuk. Ki ti yochlu. Yosef says to his aides, the men will eat with me today. Liros in Yanam in Binyamin. Yosef wants to see up close how they interact with Binyamin. Ulanasos, he wants to test out Imikanubo Kishiyirbe Masas Binyamin Mimasos Kulam. He wants to have a meal with them. He wants to see how they treat him. If they treat him with love and affection, he gives them all gifts, and he specifically gives Binyamin more. It's a test. He wants to see, will they treat him with jealousy? Will they interact with him with jealousy when the viceroy gives him more gifts? Because Yosef wants to see what the family dynamic is. Yosef was victimized by their ganging up against him, by their jealousy of him. He's curious what the dynamic is between them and Binyamin. And this is going to inform what Yosef does moving forward. It's going to be acceptable what he sees with them and Binyamin. And this is going to be a positive step towards his ultimately being ready to reveal himself to them. So we discussed this morning, both the Ramban and Sforno, in terms of why, when the brothers express their regret, they only talk about the cruelty of ignoring Yosef's pleas. Why don't they talk about the sale? We discussed the Ramban and Rashi regarding why does Yaakov not refer to Shimon by name? And we discussed the Sforno regarding Yosef's plans of hosting the brothers upon their return.